Everybody's talking about solar energy at the moment. This is solar energy. These trees, this grass, that bluebell field. Nature's taking sunlight and turning it into carbohydrate.
The point of Seed and Spoon is to introduce people to farmers, producers, restaurants that use local produce, to highlight what they do, how they do it, the hard work that goes into it. And we want to talk about why we believe in eating seasonal local produce.
We're at Greenways Fruit Farm, and this is their story. We arrived around 11 a.m, and after meeting Graham in the courtyard, we set off on a tour of his incredible farm. We looked at rosettas, quinces, greengages, plums, pears, bramleys, coxes, spartans, red devils, scrumptious, and asparagus.
This is the village Hurstman Sue's allotments.
Okay.
We grow here, and a couple of small holders doing their own thing over here.
Yeah.
It's nice to get people back on the land doing things
Growing,
like growing their own
Absolutely.
food.
How many people have you got here, do you know?
I think there's about 50 plots.
Wow.
And probably 4 or 5 of them are not taken up at the moment.
Yeah.
Got chickens and ducks.
Yeah.
Like we take for granted our electricity supply and our water supply, we take our food supply totally for granted.
Yep.
and assume it's going to keep coming.
Yeah, well, I think there'll be big shifts and changes, won't there? Well, these gooseberries.
This is gooseberry. They're quite popular. It's an unusual fruit. We have lots of people walking dogs
Yeah, I've met a few
and,
already.
and horses around the farm.
Yeah.
Because the countryside is for entertainment now. It's not for growing food, is it? It's for just for getting our therapy. Farming has been so successful in the last 40 or 50 years. When I was young, there was only 2 billion people to feed every day.
Yeah.
Now we're up to 8 billion, and food is cheaper than it's ever been.
Yeah.
It's been an incredible success story. But of course, people have got so used not to doing this handwork anymore.
Yeah.
That we're looking at robots in farming now, because we're not convinced we can get enough, staff, people to do it physically.
Or willing
And yet
to
it's,
do it.
it's therapy. Work is therapy.
Yeah.
It's not money, it's therapy. Because we've switched our mind over to thinking it's just,
All
the
about money.
first question is, how much will you pay me?
Yeah.
Which is understandable, they've got to make money.
Yeah.
But what I've noticed is the minimum wage right is now £10 an hour. So you get £1 every 6 minutes of effort. You make 6 minutes of effort and you can get a loaf of bread. Food is so bloody cheap.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then we had our electricity bill in from October through to here, and it was 6,000 quid. I divided it down to the days.
Yeah.
It was £42 a day. There's 8 of us living here, £5 per person. In 30 minutes of effort, you get all your energy needs for the day. If you relate it back to how much we earn, food is really cheap.
As the world around Greenways Farm has changed rapidly, Graham's environment has remained remarkably similar over the decades. His view on the cost of food being at the right price, knowing the toil that goes into producing it, I can relate to. But the question is, whose pockets are being filled with the increase?
So we got trees to our left and our right.
This is one of our cherry orchards. We put a framework over the top. We have to keep the birds off cherries,
Yeah.
as well as the human beings, the dog walkers. We have to keep them out of the cherry orchard as well, because cherries. And then when the pickers come, we put sticky tape over their mouths in order to
some fruit,
make sure
yeah.
the cherries go in the picking basket.
So when will this be covered?
In beginning of June this
When
year.
the fruit starts
Beginning of
coming.
June. Yeah. We get these summer storms. It really plays havoc with the netting, so
Yeah.
we don't want it on longer than
need
it has to go
No,
on.
Of course. And so this is an apple orchard?
This is an apple orchard. This variety you're looking at is called Rosetta.
Yeah.
It's an early red, pink-fleshed apple, very much like Discovery, if you've heard of Discovery apples.
Yeah.
It's still in flower, and yet it's an early apple. This is just the quirkiness of nature.
Yeah. Yeah.
Modern fruit growing is all about little trees, easy to pick, easy to crop. The old-fashioned way was growing a big tree because there was no such thing as herbicides. So you had to control the grass with sheep or geese.
Yeah.
So the trees were bigger in
Yeah.
those days.
Yeah.
In times gone by, a farmer's goal was to get each tree to bear a high yield of fruit, but things have changed because of the supermarkets. People now expect a perfect piece of fruit any season of the year. We used to have large trees with great yields of fruit, whereas now the trees are smaller and the yield is smaller, but the fruit size is bigger.
Here's a tree on the left here that I I don't know whether any of you will guess what it is.
I'm
And
not going
there's-
to embarrass myself by trying to guess.
These are quinces.
Oh, okay. The quince in this country, you've got to cook it before you eat it, whereas the Japanese quince you can eat off the tree. As a chef, you'd ball them up and turn them into like a quince jelly to go with cheese.
Yes.
That's
Yes.
one of the most
My
popular
mother
things.
always made quince jam.
Yeah,
I think if we look at this variety, again, it won't have any fruit because it didn't have any blossom. This one had blossom. So whether the blossoms have stayed on, yes, there you are. You can see some
fruit grown.
plants. This
Yeah.
was planted last spring,
Yeah,
a year ago,
yeah.
and it should have a bit of fruit this autumn.
So I noticed that the branches are quite spread apart and coming outwards. So does that encourage the light to get to it, as opposed to bunched up and sort of growing upwards to get the light? Is that why they're like that, or?
Yeah, if you look at all nature, the trees, the wood that goes upright makes timber.
Yeah,
Just grows and grows, gets stronger. The cropping wood on all trees that has the seeds and the nuts is always flat.
yeah,
So the Christmas tree shape
yeah,
is what we're trying to do, hence the tying down of the more upright branches.
yeah. Are you training this and then it'll
Yeah,
stay at this height?
we're stopping at that height. If you
Right.
go much higher,
Yeah,
you get too much shade in the bottom of the tree.
yeah,
So there's only so much light in this hemisphere.
yeah.
So light penetrates into a tree about a metre
Right.
maximum. That's why you see most trees have lots of wooden branches and nothing going on inside.
Yeah.
And just round the outside,
Yeah,
they have the fruit.
yeah.
So that's another reason why we have small trees.
So you grow 20 odd varieties of apples, and they come at the different times of through the growing season, so that gives you longevity as a farmer.
Up until the 1990s, we were completely tied in with a cooperative. They took our whole crop, marketed it into supermarkets.
Yeah,
But as globalisation went on and the supermarkets could source from everywhere,
yeah,
the English crop became less and less important and less profitable to supply the supermarkets
right.
because they could get fruit from all over the world.
Much cheaper.
So then this farm, we diversified
Yeah.
into selling locally,
Yeah.
also seeing the future is local food.
Yeah,
And so we started to put like the asparagus, the rhubarb, the soft fruit, and lots of different apple varieties to give people interest. Because in the supermarket you have about two or three varieties,
yeah,
and that's simple for them. But there's so many different flavours and tastes of apples.
yeah. It's incredible, isn't it? Yeah,
Yeah. Now this orchard is the oldest on the farm.
yeah.
It's about 1 or 2 years younger than me.
Wow.
They say you plant pears for your heirs. This always looks a bit scary at the moment, but these will all run very quickly. They'll start turning yellow and dropping off, and then we'll know what crop we've got.
Okay.
This is a Commies pear tree. But this year is phenomenal. They loved last year's summer, I think. The blossom is formed when you're picking the crop of the previous year.
Okay.
The buds are being laid down, and
Yeah.
so we've got a phenomenal pear crop. Looks like it's
So the crop season the year after all depends
Yeah.
on the previous
previous season.
Previous season.
So this orchard was planted in 1950, I think.
Wow.
Can you believe? And it's been pruned every year.
Stunning.
There's a lot of the trees are younger than that, with gapping up and stuff.
Yeah.
But now they're dying out because they're so old.
So the average life expectancy, if well looked after, is what?
a
60,
pear orchard, yeah, 60,
70 years.
60, 70 years.
To say that Graham has inherited a family business doesn't quite do it justice. On this humble plot of land in his care stands life that's been here since before he was born. So what happens once these wise old trees bear their fruit?
We go through and pick the best for supermarkets, leave these smaller, less ripe ones still sitting on the tree.
Yeah.
Then we'll come back and pick them for local sales.
Yeah.
And if that's not available, then we'll pick them for apple juice.
Yeah.
There's become a very big market for apple juice.
Yeah.
Like the local gin makers, cider makers,
Yeah.
everybody's into turning primary product into something more,
Yeah.
which is great.
Benefits you as well. doesn't it?
It's a use, it's something that you wouldn't have a sale for otherwise.
Yeah.
So it's not just our fruit bowls that these apples find themselves in once they've left the farmyard. It's our local juice makers and the breweries serving the community too. As old trees die and new space is freed up, I'm curious to know Graham's process for making sure that the land is put back in action.
So in terms of planting a new load of trees,
We planted 1,000 this spring.
So every year you're
February.
planting more, some are dying away.
Well, we're trying to, yeah.
How long have you farmed here for?
My parents came here in 1950.
Yeah,
I was 1 year old at that time.
yeah,
I think before I was born, I wanted to be a fruit grower.
yeah.
So I found some parents to be born to who did all the hard work of making the business and setting it up.
Yeah,
So I could inherit it.
and carry on the legacy.
And now I've got a farm manager who's been with me for 17 years now.
Wow.
And him and his wife see a future doing this.
Yeah,
And they want to continue. So it's great. I can do less.
and they can pick it up.
Yeah.
In a picking season, how many people would you have?
Probably about 15.
Okay.
The advantage of having about 26 different varieties is it spreads your picking dates
No,
out.
of course, yeah.
Whereas when we were just in the supermarkets, we had pears to pick 1 week, and then 2 weeks after that we pick the coxes. Everything goes on longer now,
Yeah,
but less intensity,
yeah, it makes sense.
less intensity of harvest.
Yeah. So what have we got here?
Another young apple orchard with 4 or 5, 6 different varieties. These are Cox's apples you're looking at just here.
Yeah.
Then we've got Spartan. You probably wouldn't know these names.
Some of them
You'll
ring
have
a
to
bell.
come back in harvest time and see all the varieties. Spartan, Welland.
John O'Gold, what do you
Redwind.
do John O'Gold?
Yes, that was that other orchard we looked at earlier. Only we call it's a red one, so it's John a Prince.
Right, okay.
It's a red, so because the public are attracted to red, to the colour, so red apples are always popular.
Yeah.
These are Spartan. They're very susceptible to canker, which kills the trees.
Canker.
Canker is cancer of an apple tree,
Right.
except canker is a fungus disease. Some varieties are more resistant to diseases than others.
Yeah.
But very often, if they're resistant to the disease, they don't have the flavour as well. The difficulty of the problems the tree has gives you a lovely flavoursome apple.
So it's a bit like our lives, when people that have really been through the mill in life,
Become more sensitive.
and they have more flavour to the way that they are, more compassion, more understanding, more because
Yeah.
of the stuff they've been through.
Yeah, they
So
don't
it's
take
similar.
anything for granted.
Yeah,
Yeah.
similar.
Farming and agriculture are not fields that simply require the right skill set. They demand a certain type of character, a person with resilience, or as Toos put it in our previous episode, good friends with themselves, as a lot of these jobs can be lonely, long and hard work. Farming is not for the faint-hearted. And I think this is testament to Graham's earlier comment that work isn't just about a paycheck. You've got to really enjoy what you're doing come rain or shine, to stand the test of time.
Oh, the tree has collapsed in. This is a deer has done this, munkjack. They pushed the tree over and chewed the bark.
Do you have a lot of problems with deer?
We would have a problem with them. So that's interesting. Okay, it's good to walk around and see this. Just all of our farm has got a rabbit-proof fence all the way around it.
Yeah.
And where the deer can get in, which I don't think is here, we put a string bamboo fence around on top of it so that the deer can't jump over.
Yeah.
But they still get in. And then of course there's lots of badgers. Badgers is a protected species, unfortunately. So all the things that badgers live on have a hard time of it because nobody's allowed to kill the badgers. If you protect one species, it will have a big impact on the other species around.
Yeah.
And so the badgers dig holes through the fence. We then put a cat flap so that the badgers can come through and hopefully the rabbits won't. Best we can do.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's lots going on in the countryside.
Most people assume that the main challenges for produce farmers would be the elements and plant-based diseases. But actually, one of the biggest headaches is wildlife, from birds to badgers and deers, right down to the minute flies and insects.
These other trees that you've planted, is that for like
yeah,
a windbreak?
windbreaks,
Yeah.
yes. It's alder incarnate. An alder is like clover. It fixes its own nitrogen
Right.
with its bacterial relationship in the soil, so it fixes nitrogen. So they're a variety that's very not competitive with the fruit tree.
Perfect,
Other than it steals the light,
Yeah.
but it doesn't steal the nutrients out the soil. There's meant to be about 2,200 apples in our national collection.
Wow.
And I'm doing 25, 26, so
That's
it's
not
like,
bad, yeah.
I'm not doing that many. So that's a replacement pear orchard for the one that we came through earlier.
Yeah.
So they're a bit younger. They're now 12, 14 years old.
Oh, okay.
Beginning to crop quite well.
Yeah.
And this is an old Cox orchard, which really needs grubbing, but we haven't got round.
So grubbing is what?
Replacing,
Right.
taking them out. You'll see where we've done some replacement orchards.
So if you're going to do grubbing here, for instance, would you just pick out sporadic trees, or would you just clear a whole
No, we have
row,
to clear
the whole lot
site.
and then replant?
We're cutting out the dead trees at the moment. You have to have a chainsaw, you don't do it by hand.
Yeah.
You cut all the side branches off, bung them in the windrow,
Yeah.
then cut the trunks down to ground level and
Yeah.
cart them off for firewood. You'll see a stack of those.
Yeah.
And then we get a mini digger in that just lifts the roots out.
Yeah.
Goes down the row and lifts the roots out. They windrow. Then you get a great big JCB telehandler, and they'll go down the row, pick up a big bunch of toppings and a big bunch of roots,
Yeah.
bung them all on the fire, burn the whole lot.
Yeah.
It's almost easier grubbing and replanting than it is pruning the orchard,
Yeah.
because the pruning is handwork and,
Of course.
and sensible human beings.
Winding the clock back a few decades, grubbing would have been an arduous task, taking many people a long period of time. But with the advancement of technology, it can now be done within a matter of days.
So that's the farm all spread out in all its glory up
Yeah.
ahead of you.
It's beautiful.
You're back already.
I'm Ross.
Ross, of course you are.
Good to meet you.
So these were all put in the ground in February.
Yeah.
They got too much blossom on them for the first year. We think we'll have to take it off somehow. And Arthur, because he's strong, he put the stakes in the ground, because you can't hit them with a hammer, they're too high.
Yeah.
So he made a big hole and dropped them
them
in.
in.
So these are Egrant russets, a very old-fashioned English variety,
Yep.
very nutty and different to other apples.
How long, just to do this, how long is that going to take?
To crop or to
plant,
to
once
plant?
it's,
How long
to
do
re-get
the
it all in.
planters? Well, once you've got the land prepared with
Yeah, yeah.
machines and made soft, we take out a big trench with a ridging machine,
Yeah.
and then we just have a cane and plant them 5 foot apart,
Yeah.
and then put the stakes in. So I think that we did it in a couple of days, I suppose. There's 1,000 trees.
Still, it's pretty quick, isn't it?
But then we've been doing it for years. We've worked out the quickest and most efficient way
Exactly.
of doing it.
Yeah. Wisdom from
And
the
we-
older
Yeah.
people that know what they're doing. Yeah.
And you saw those two ladies, how hard they were working.
Yeah.
They do work hard.
Yeah.
Harder than I want to work now.
So I suppose when your parents first had this farm, that wasn't there.
Yeah, I've climbed up there.
Oh, have you?
When I was, rabbit, you can climb up them. They're nice. You get a nice view from
I'll
the
give it
top.
a miss, but thanks for the offer.
As I approached the end of my time with Graham on his farm, we had one more stop to make, and it happened to be a personal favourite of mine.
We're going to rotivate down here and earth them up a little bit, put them on a ridge.
Yeah. So the asparagus, it reseeds itself and keeps growing, doesn't it?
It's an underground root.
Yeah. So is it true that asparagus can grow quite a few inches in one night?
Yes. Yeah, it does. Further along, there was a bit we put in last year. We are cutting it. We shouldn't really. We should leave it for 2 years.
2 years, isn't it?
But
Yeah.
greed comes and the demand for this stuff.
I was talking to someone yesterday about happiness, because everyone strives to be happy. And I asked this lady, what is happiness to you then? And she said, being in the moment and seeing all the small little things, seeing the beauty and stuff. She said, that's my happiness.
You can either see this life as incredibly wonderful and interesting, or it's like, oh God, what am I here for? I've got all this work and I've got all these bills. This is a miracle. Every day of your life is going to be different. You're never going to get 2 days the same.